Hello everyone and welcome to another very exciting episode here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode we're going to talk about how we water when it comes to indoor plants and indoor gardening in general. So here we have our indoor garden, and this has drawn a lot of controversy from people that are avid indoor gardeners, and they are raising the question and also voicing their concern about how we are able to water our plants. And so I want to make this episode relatively short because there's not a whole lot to talk about when it comes to indoor watering, because a lot of it comes with just up in here using the old noggin. So if you are overwatering, it's because you're overwatering. I'm not using circle logic when I say that. The only way to overwater is to overwater. So if you are using your old noggin, you can use these tips and tricks that I'm going to show you to make sure that you're not overwatering, and also to help you know if you're, underwatering as well. And that is all in stress. Now, we talked about this and how to have a successful garden when it comes to watering. I'll post a link to that because I think it's extremely important, and it applies to both indoor and outdoor gardening. Even everything I'm saying here will apply to outdoor gardening, but I want to show you how I'm growing in a bed with absolutely no holes, with only 8 inches of soil, and still having great results. Now, in the beginning, it was definitely a little bit of trial and error to test how well the soil held on to water, as well as just how much the water evaporated. Because in any situation, you're going to have variables. Temperature plays a lot with how fast water will evaporate. So my temperature in my house is obviously different than temperature in your house. So you have to use that that part of logic to know if your temperature is quite warm, it's going to evaporate faster than if it was cooler. So there's really no set temperature to garden in, but just know that the warmer the temperature, the faster the evaporation, meaning the more frequently you're going to have to water. Also, the depth of the bed. If the bed is deeper, it's going to hold on to more water, and it's going to require more water than a shallower bed. And so that plays a lot into it, because if this bed was 12 inches or 16 inches deep, I would have to water far less than I do with 8 inches. Now, the next thing comes into humidity. Obviously, the more humid your environment is, the less you're going to have to water, because humidity, the drier the air is, the faster the soil is going to dry out as well, because they try to reach an equilibrium, and so the soil is going to evaporate off water into the air, and the more water that the air can hold, the faster it's going to take it away. If you're growing stuff like lettuce likes a lot more water than, say, beans do, but beans still like a lot less water than, a lot more water than tomatoes do. So it's all in the type of crops you're growing as well. So knowing that will also help you. But then also going back to the signs of watering is things that show stress. So stress is one of the ways that we can tell what the plant is trying to tell us, because we can't see under the soil. There's a lot going on in soil that we don't yet understand. And so what I like to look for are a couple things. I like to see, are my plants nice and green? If they're showing signs of yellowing, they're showing signs of stress. And stress can usually be found in the form of root rot, because the roots are not able to take up the nutrients or water, and that will lead us into another point that I'm going to talk about. So if your leaves are green, you're probably doing something right. If your leaves are yellow, they're probably struggling to pick up nutrients and water. That will also lead into wilt. Now, wilt can happen if your soil is dry or wet, but if you've been watering on a very regular basis, chances are it's not damp, or it's not that the soil is too dry. Also, you can notice if your soil is damp versus dry. So make sure you notice that, because if your leaves are wilting, also another sign that your roots are rotting. And root rot essentially is just the root size shrinking, meaning that the amount of nutrients and water the plant can uptake to sustain a plant of its size. A plant of its size is directly proportionate to how many roots it has. So if it loses roots, it's going to shrink in size, become dwarf. It's also going to wilt because it's not able to take enough water to support that plant. And then the very last thing that I like to look for, actually two more things I like to look for, is mold and mildew. Mold and mildew will be a very surefire sign that you are overwatering, because mold and mildew will thrive in basically a very damp environment. They need moisture, and so you will find that if you are overwatering, you'll find white or even black mold. Black mold is very bad. White mold is just breaking down organic matter. And that will also be breaking down the roots in your soil and stuff. And so you'll notice that along with root rot, you'll typically find mold and things, even mushrooms. And so mushrooms and mold are a sign that you need to lay off the watering, put a fan over the soil. And yes, you can reverse root rot. A lot of times people, they see yellowing of leaves, they see stunted growth, and they think that it's game over. It's not. It happens to the best of us. In fact, it happened a little bit here when we were just kind of trialing and seeing just how much water we needed to go, because this is the first time we've ever been growing this large of scale indoors in this type of bed. So you have to understand that. And knowing that it's okay, knowing that it's not the end of the world also helps out. You just notice those signs, catch them while it's early, and fix it. And so we put a fan on here and dry out some of the soil. And then the very last thing that I like to look for is damping off. Damping off is a definite surefire sign that you're overwatering, because it's a fungus or a mildew that will attack the stem of the plant and cause it to fall over. So if you've ever seen a bean plant that basically just falls over at the base, or if you ever had a tomato plant that starts off really nice and healthy and you think everything's great and it falls over, that's because you're overwatering. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's not because you transplanted it wrong. It's not because of any other condition other than you're just overwatering it and you're allowing a mildew and a fungus to take hold. So those are some ways that you can see that you're overwatering, and they're very, very simple to correct. So what I want to also end on is the fact that people oftentimes, they will, they'll ask me, Luke, I don't know if I have enough nutrients. I don't know if I have enough, if my soil is good enough, or I don't know if my lights are good enough. And what I would say to that is, if you have added nutrients to your soil, if your soil is a good quality mix, and you have very powerful lights that other people are using, you should be very satisfied that you have done everything right. And so you don't have to worry about those things. Watering is one of the biggest components that can lead to a failed garden, because nutrients are important, but they're more long-term. As your plants are young, they need a lot less nutrients. And so even if you hardly had any nutrients, you'd mostly see those things later on in the plant's life, not right away. So watering definitely plays more of a role and will help you understand your plants more in the very beginning stages, because they need water, but they don't need as much nutrients. They need a lot of soil, or they need a lot of soil when the plants get larger, but when they're small, they don't need that much soil. So soil and nutrients and things like that, those are components we can talk about and worry about later. As far as lights go, just make sure they're getting a really good source of compact fluorescent light. Make sure they're getting a south-facing window with at least 4 to 5 hours of sun. 6 or 7 would be even better. But then also, just using your common sense and using that brain up there. We have a lot of videos on, and I want people to feel confident growing indoors, because this is not hard. We really do not do anything. The lights come on and off with a timer, and we just come down here and water. We've already put the fertilizer in the soil, and they're just rocking and rolling. They're growing, and that is awesome. So we're going to have food really soon. All we have to do is just plant the seeds and water every so often. So definitely make sure you check out those videos. I will post a link to the whole series, the 3-part series on how to have a successful garden, because I think it's important, and it definitely applies to indoor gardening. But hopefully that answers your questions about watering and things like that, because there's been a lot of concern over this bed here and kind of how we regulate our watering. And then also, one thing to end on is when we water in the rows and do not water directly on the leaves, solely for the fact that down here we don't get that much airflow. And that's another thing to look at as far as how often you need to be watering. If you're in a place that does not get a lot of airflow, like a basement, you're going to be watering a lot less than if you were upstairs with a lot of cross ventilation and stuff. So just some things to think about. And so we're just trying to prevent the mold and mildew issue, because that also kind of is mold and mildew really comes on strong with low airflow. And so if you put a fan down here, you'll notice your soil will dry out faster, but you'll also have a lot less mold and mildew issues. But since we're not going with a fan, we're just trying to not water the leaves as much so that the leaves stay relatively dry, and we can prevent some of those issues. So there you go. There is watering on an indoor garden. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Hopefully you learned something new. And if you have any comments or questions, please let us know in the comments box below. I'd be glad to answer them, and let us know how you think everything's growing. I am so pleased with it so far. And coming up Friday, we're going to be doing a very cool update on the garden. There's a lot going on here, and we definitely want to bring you all up to speed on how it's growing week by week. So that's coming up. And also, we have a very cool episode, extremely awesome. We discovered old seed from the 1920s, and that video is coming up in about, I think, about a week or so. So definitely stay tuned for that. And then we'll also be talking about in the coming times some information that we like to use in terms of text information. So we have video information, we have photo information, and we really like to bring in information when it comes to like books. And people always ask us what type of books we read. So we're going to be talking about that in an upcoming episode as well. Some of our favorite sources of book information, if you will. And that's going to be awesome. So lots on the docket. And I definitely don't want to spoil too much about the old seed, but we're going to be sprouting, or attempting to sprout at least, some very, very old, super old vintage seed. And you'll have to watch out to see just how we came about it. So awesome. All right, catch you later. Bye.